Okay. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I don't know. I can't see myself anyway. It doesn't matter. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu rasulihil kareem. Wa ala alihi wa shahbihi wa man stana bi sunnati yawmiddin. Qala rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to this session, and my sincere apology for the technical problem. As you know, if you don't hear me or my voice is you're losing my voice, please just bear with it, because where I'm staying at the moment, the connectivity problem, the internet problems are big, problems, and sometimes there's lack of connectivity. So I hope to get back to you, inshallah, that everything will be okay. Anyway, thank you for inviting me, the IUU Indonesian group, and I was supposed to do this talk a while ago, and inshallah we managed to do it today. And anyway, let's start. I mean, I'm going to probably a lot of things that I'm going to talk about is probably already, just a matter of just an overview of psychology from Islamic perspective. So let's start with, I have a little story there, which I know probably people will say it's nothing to do with Islamic psychology, but to do with psychology, to do with psychiatry. This is a real story. This is a book from Oliver Sacks, who was a psychiatrist. He wrote a book about the man who mistake his wife for a hijab, really, or hat, anyway. Sometimes it was hijab, So he basically he couldn't recognize any faces, or he mistakes other objects as faces. For example, he was a brilliant musician. He had and of distinction. He was very well known for many years as a singer, and then at the local school of music, and he was a teacher. So he was a brilliant man. He was a doctor. He PhD in music, and also approach him. They couldn't his visual memory, in fact, and he
Yes, we can hear you now. We can hear you now, doctor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, yeah. So, I mean, will you control my screen because I won't be able to control it?
So I will control the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Just say
Okay.
it if you want to move to the next slide.
So yeah, yeah. Did I fit? Yeah. Let's move on to the. Go on. Yeah. Move on. Move it to the. I think. Did we talk? Did anybody hear me talking about this? No.
It's better to say it again.
Shall I restart from the beginning?
Yes, yes, restart it.
Okay. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته يوم الدين قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My sincere apology for the problem with connection and connectivity. I have a problem here. Sometimes electricity goes off, so please, bear with me if we do have cut off and so sorry about the technical problem. Let's start straight away. Don't want to waste much time. Let's have the next slide, please. Basically, I want to show you something which is, of course, it's nothing to do with Islamic psychology, but there's somebody who always and he had problem. He had problem because he could recognize. He hear you, you recognize you by your voice, but not by your face. So sometimes people would come in front of me, he won't recognize them. For example, a student would come in front of me, he wouldn't recognize them. When they speak to him, then they can. So probably can see detail, but not whole. He has problem with visual memory. He had difficulty, of course, in daily living activities, and it's a true story. And also it was written by Oliver Sacks, which is a psychiatrist, although for some reason he can recognize building on the left or on the right. So, it was very difficult for him anyway. Sometimes he mistaken knobs of the door for something else anyway. And sometimes, he mistake his wife for a hijab, for a headscarf or something like that. So basically, in the end, what they found that he had problem with his visual processing, which is in the occipital lobe, and he had what they call visual agnosia. This was a problem. You had a tumor. You had a tumor, a part of the sort of area, the circuit, where they had problems with visuals. So anyway, I thought, it's just a story. rather than anything up to do with psychiatry. Let's move on anyway to the go on the next slides. No, we don't need that anyway. Just the next one, please. Yeah. So people would say, what is psychology? What is Islamic psychology? And let's move on. The first question is basically, some people might say, next slide, please. Is that there's no link between psychology and Islam. Of course, there's a lot of relationship between psychology and Islam, because if we define psychology as human behavior, then we can look at the whole Quran and Hadith. It's all about human behavior. Wow. So if we move on to the next slide, this is a very famous Hadith from a Muslim, which is an authentic Hadith. It's about, I'm not going to read it, I'm just going to tell you the story very quickly. It's about Anas bin Malik said, that, while he was in masjid, they were praying, and somebody, came and urinated in the masjid. You got to think at that time, the masjid there was no carpet, it was just like probably rocks or sand, or some sort of leaves, at the bottom. So, I mean, he urinated, but again, the Sahaba around there was very, were not happy, because they wanted to scold him. They were saying, ma, sort of expression used to scold people. But then Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, left him alone until he finished urinating. Then afterwards, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called him over and told him basically that, this is not acceptable and so forth. And, and then asked the others to throw a bucket of water on, where he urinated. Now, what can we learn from this particular hadith? The lots we can learn. One is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was gentle, in his behavior. He didn't scold him. He didn't tell him off. Just imagine if he stopped the person urinating. That could be a medical problem. There could be all sorts of problems. So he let allow that person to carry on his basic function anyway. But it wasn't finished. So there was a lot of gentleness rather than harshness. And so what we can learn from this hadith, that we need to be gentle with people sometimes because they're ignorant. Not because because they're ignorant. Sometimes we have to be gentle. But at the same time, we have to tell them or provide them explanation why their behavior is not acceptable or unacceptable. So we need to tell, instead of rebuking him, we could, talk to him gently, not harshly. And, of course, we need to enjoin what is good and forbid what is wrong. I mean, what he was doing was wrong, but it's not the right thing to do to try to stop the person. Anyway. So there's a lot of understanding there, a lot of acceptance there, which is equivalent to empathy. So if you study just hadith itself, forget Quran, you learn a lot about human behavior and experience, and also how Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used a lot of counseling skill, inverted commas, or interpersonal skills anyway. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot we can learn from hadith and Quran and try to explain about human behavior. Okay, let's move on to the next slides, please. Of course, if you see the Quran, and we know, if I ask anybody any questions, what comes first, hearing or vision? Anyway, you could answer that afterwards. But basically, we hear first before we could see. Anyway, and also you can see in the Quran talk about these probably what we call biological bits of behavior, which is physiological psychology. Hearing as a gift, creation of hearing that came first before sight, which I say, and hearing is constant linking with the outside world. So again, you could say, if you look at embryology itself, we come back to the next slide. Can we have the next slide? And you find that there are a lot of these things in the Quran anyway. And all right, yeah. Again, it's about Surah Al-Mulk, and a interpretation of the meaning of Arabic, and there's Allah talk about hearing and vision and hearts, little or grateful, and also from the Bukhari and Tirmidhi, which is another authentic hadith. And Prophet Sallallahu said, "If I deprive my servant of his two beloved, his eyes, and remain patient, I will give him paradise incompetent." So again, there's a lot of you can be, for me, you can Of course, you need to look at tafsir as well, what it meant by that. But you can draw from these and bring to understand human behavior. Can we have the next one, please? Again, the next one is about formation of the human body. If you have to learn, and some professor, I can't remember his name now. Anyway, and in Canada, he told his student, basically, if you want to learn embryology, forget about textbook, read the Quran, because it tells you all the detail, the developmental phase from the clot, the nufta to formation of human anyway. So and you got to think that 14,440 years ago there was no microscope, there was nothing else. So how could somebody who's supposed to be illiterate and that can't read and write produce such a thing? So this is the questions really. We're talking about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam there. Oh, it's Mo, Keith Mo, his name is the professor of Canada, and because he was working with the Saudi and he found all these things in the Quran so in a way, if you want to learn about embryology, which is then it's again from the Quran. Next slide, please. Yeah. Again, child development, and we talk about human life. Is this about developmental psychology, really? Because if you look at from sort of the man and the woman and the relationship and the sperm and and the leech and the clot and everything else, and and it goes from different stages as babies and and then become dependent, you're feeble at old age. Again, it's like what they call in French the rite of passage, which means the rite of passage between birth till death anyway. Again, this is again the Quran. It's not from any psychology book. So there's so much, like you say, there's a big link between what I'm trying to show, the big link between Quran and the next slide, please. I think this again, the controlled movement, which is the forelock. What in the Hadith say? No, indeed, no. So the Quran anyway. No, if I read, it's the bottom bit. No, indeed, if he doesn't stop, we will grab him by his forelock. Line said. So again, it's to do with the forelock, the prefrontal area, to do with personality, and and also it initiate movement as well, and it's about behavior, especially the frontal lobe, prefrontal lobe, which is sort of the function of one of the things, aggression. That's why in the Quran talking about grab him by his forelock. Anyway, so there's a lot of a relationship there. And the next slide also show the same thing, because it's to do with fingerprinting. As we know, fingerprinting is unique. There's no two fingerprint in the world. And Allah said in the Quran, verses 3 and 4 in Surah 75, yes, interpretation of meaning, yes, we are able to put together in perfect order the very tips of the fingers, which mean your fingerprint. And like I say, your fingerprint is unique. Nobody else have another one. The code, the code bar, really. Your code bar is unique to you. There's nobody else, of your fingerprint. So again, of course, people didn't understand it at that time, but more and more when we look at the Quran and the more scientific evidence, we realize that a lot of things were said in the Quran, but we don't understand anyway. Next slides, please. Again, this we have these type of nerves, the different type of nerves, the Amara, the Lawama, and the Mutemaina. All these are found in the Quran. Now, some people might say, well, they are, some people equate them really with the Freudian psychosexual development of id, ego, and superego, okay, the stage of development. I personally, I think you can try to say, right, the id is this and the ego is that, but I think there's no difference anyway, because you have to go back to human nature. Our human nature is very different from Freudian conception of human nature. So you can use an example to understand it, but there's no difference anyway. And basically, this like yesterday I had a question on these, whether these things are circular. Of course, because depending on the context of the situation, you move from one to another sometimes. And we're children of Adam. We are bound to errors. We make human errors, but then we have to repent. All I want to show you is I want to go in detail in it, just to show you that there is a relationship between psychology or human behavior and the Quran. Next one. Again, talk about mental illness and majnoon, insane or psychotic. And in medieval time, Islamic medicine was called, Im al-Nafs. Nafs means self, Tib al-Ruhani, healing of spirit, or Tib al-Qalb, healing of the heart, which is so there's a lot of in the Quran itself. There's a lot of and also from the classical scholars, a different name given to different type of medicine. Next one, please. Again, the Quran, Surah Nisa, verses 5, Allah said in the Quran about the people who are weak-minded, basically people who are mental ill or mentally handicapped or severely handicapped, and Allah has made a means for providing sustenance for them and provide them with clothes and speak to them. Basically, some sort of advocacy as well. So it's there that you cannot give somebody who's weak mind to run a business, basically, and they need to have some advocate. They need to have somebody or some trustee that be able to look after the affairs anyway. Okay. So again, to do with people with mental health problem. Okay, next one. And this is just, the list is not exhaustive, but again, was Prophet? No, of course, he was not a therapist in what the modern word is, but what he did was no difference from what we are doing, from what professional therapists are doing, in the sense that he encouraged treatment, encouraged therapy, encouraged people to talk. He didn't have one answer for every question. That's why sometimes, the hadith was said in different ways for different people, for different level. So we didn't have one hadith, because when he talked to somebody, it was talking to their level, to the the context they come from, and so forth. So that's why there was no one answer for the same question. He paid attention to people, articulate his counseling, the way he would sit as well, the way he would look at people. He always looked at people and talked to them. He listened to them. He empathized. So when you and being non-judgmental as well, like we saw in the hadith of the Bedouin urinating in Masjid Nabawi in Medina. So again, it was empathy. And so in a way, that when people talk about Carl Rogers discovered empathy, discovered all these things, no, nobody discovered anything, but that's what people associate with him. But so all the criteria, for example, in Rogerian counseling, and all these things that if you study the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're going to find all these. Just looking at these, not only just looking at, apart from leadership, that's another thing, but just looking at the interpersonal skills, you can write a lot about it. If you study the seerah of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can just look at interpersonal skill and all these things we're talking about in counseling psychology. In counseling, psychotherapy, all these it's been there, it's been done anyway. And I was saying to some people yesterday that basically, before psychotherapy or professional therapy or whatever you want to call it, religion did people, the Imam did it. Nowadays, we more or less make it a business, and then we take it away from the religious people and move it to to professional people anyway. And now we probably want to go back to the scholars again, have scholars trained. But as you know, in classical time, most of our scholars, they were what they call polymath. They all not only study philosophy, but also mathematics, arithmetic, geography, and all sorts of things. And they were Hafiz at the same time, they study the Quran and Hadith. So, they were what they call polymath. Maybe we need people with polymath nowadays. I don't know. Okay, let's move on. Now, most people say Muslims don't know anything about psychology, and I thought, it'd be something from Numan Ali Khan Ibrahim to like him. He said that modern psychology focused on fixing people, Islamic psychology focused on showing the perfection in our creation. I thought that was a nice quote. Anyway, now to understand that, the secret is that, of course, if you look back in the what they call, next slide please, what we call the golden age. The golden age of Islam. This is the golden age of Islam between the 8th, 9th century to the 14th century, and this is more or less the empire that the during the Abbasid period, yeah, that the people have, from Kabul, moving, stuff, Uzbekistan and all these part, Armenia, and going back to Saudi Arabia, from the northern part of Africa, the Maghreb country, Tunisia, Algeria, and so forth, and Iberia, which is nowadays Portugal, and they reach up to Avignon. Well, not really Avignon, but Sorbonne, which is about 2 days from Paris, really. So this was a empire, the Abbasid Empire during the 8th and 9th century, and this is what we call the Golden Age. Next slide, please. This is when everything happened, yeah, because this was a time when the Greek manuscript in Alexandria, for example, there was a big library in Alexandria, still there. If one day you go to Alexandria in Egypt, there's a huge library, and there's a lot of I was there twice, but unfortunately I didn't see. But they said that there are some manuscript of Imam Bukhari there. I can vouch for it, but they say there's some. I never was able to see it. Anyway, but at that time, the Muslim scholars, Islamic scholars, translated the Greek work into from Greek to Arabic, because if they didn't do that, nowadays Western Europe would be still in the Dark Ages. It was through the translation of all these Greek script, manuscript, and works, and of course their own development as well, that people that Europe could have what they call the Enlightenment, the Renaissance period. Anyway, that's another story. But anyway, so there was a lot of advances in different area, because some of these, like scholars, was polymath. They knew mathematics, geometry, and some of the original scientific method. For example, you could see some of the people, they developed like clinical trial. Nowadays, like we know about COVID-19 pandemic, to develop a vaccine, you have to do a lot of tests. I mean, they developed all these procedure before. There was an invention of modern teaching hospital, medical encyclopedia, translation of Greek literature, but also philosophy. There was Kalam as well, concerned with nature of God and relationship between man and God, between faith and reason. So at this time, the golden age was the age where there was an expansion in every field of knowledge. There was no psychology at this time, there was philosophy. And this is where psychology comes from. Next one. You had all these people, like, for example, Caliph Harun al-Rashid, you probably heard about him. He built in Iraq, the House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom was a place where, Beit al-Hikmah, it's called, in Arabic, Beit. Beit is house, and Hikmah is wisdom. And not only Muslims were working there, but everybody, all the different people, Christian and Jews, they were working those they were the biggest library in the world. Oxford University, Cambridge, all these didn't even exist. England or Europe was in Dark Ages. They had the biggest library. Of course, it was sacked by the Mongols, Genghis Khan, who later on became Muslim. But anyway, the Khan still controlled most of these places nowadays. Anyway, descendant of Khan. But anyway, the House of Wisdom was a big library. This is where everything was translated. There was discussion. There was critical examination. There was a lot of knowledge there. Anyway, and then you find all these different people, like Jahiz. He discussed evolution. Now, evolution psychology. Darwin didn't discuss about this before. There was Islamic scholars discuss about this. What we call nowadays evolution psychology. So of course, the problem we have is most of us don't speak Arabic. So you can't read Arab's manuscript. Alhamdulillah, some of these manuscripts are being translated into English. So and now we have access to them. So in a way, but evolution psychology was there before Darwin. Darwin came later on, Imam Bukhari compiled official hadith, Imam Bukhari, he was born in Bukhara, but he got buried in Samarkand. I was fortunate 3 years ago, I was on a tour of Uzbekistan there. And also Moses Maimonides, he's a Jew, but he was one of the great Talmudic scholars of all time. Again, he worked, we've during that time, I think he probably worked in Darul Hikmah, father of robotics, and of course Ibn Sina, who we know that Avicenna, and one of the most influential founders of modern medicine. So there were a lot of things happened during that stage. Of course, let's move on to the next one, number 21. What happened is that, of course, everything that goes up come down for all sorts of reasons. We won't go into detail. We can speak to all just on it. There's a decline. The Crusade came along. The Mongol came and destroyed Baghdad. The school was destroyed. Books were lost, and then you start having problems between the different school of thought, the Mutazilite, and then came along the Asharite school, which nowadays most people are Asharite, and that's what the whole problem is. Again, that's another thing. But there was a decline for all sorts of reasons. It was not only one factor, but multiple factors. Also, people start fighting. Muslims start fighting among themselves. That's another one. So there are many reasons for decline of it. But nevertheless, this is what we call still the golden age. Next slides, I think if we have Avicenna, is it? Right. Yeah. Avicenna, very famous and pioneer. He was born again in Astana, in a place called Bukhara, which is in nowadays Uzbekistan anyway, and he was a pioneer of everything almost anyway, and that's his original copy of his manuscript. Can we move on to the next slides, please? Yeah. Again, we're talking about clinical trials. Like, for example, if you're going to use a drug nowadays, you have to test it with people and animals first, and then people, and and look at side effects. He basically set up all these clinical trials, pharmacology, how to do experimentation, basically, of clinical trial of drugs or medication, and we still use the same principle. So again, there's such a big heritage there, and let's move on to the next slides. And if you look at all the things he talked about, there's mention about hallucination. You talk about dementia, epilepsy, paralysis, all these different physical and medical and neurological problems. He basically talk about. So again, these were. We don't read about new psychology books, anything that it was discovered by the West. No, it's nothing to do with that. But a lot of these were there. But when you read history, the problem is you read what they call a Orientalist. You read an Eurocentric. You read a sort of anti-Muslim narrative of history. So nobody tell you about these things when you study at school. That medicine or even health. That these Islamic scholars discovered all these before anyway. But in the 8th, 9th, 10th century. Okay, let's move on. I won't go into it. This is about the psychology, about the senses. You talk about all these different senses. 7 senses, are by common sense, retentive, different type of imagination, and give example of all these different type of things. So if you study psychology, there's a lot to. Again, you can look at this is to do perception and sensation as well. Perception, sensation, memory, and processing. So there's a lot to learn. It just because we don't know anyway. We tend to only learn what we get from Western book. Right. Next one, please. Psychosomatic disorders, basically linking body and mind. They know that psychological problem cause physical problem. Physical problem can cause psychological problem. There's a link between them. And also talk about different disorders, delirium, which we found in alcoholism and other diseases, of memory disturbances, hallucination, fear paralysis, hysteria, and also it developed a number of cures for mental fear, shock. At that time, as you know, we are not saying whether it's a haram or halal there, but they use music therapies. Music therapies were used to cure illness. And, because that was at that time, the common sort of method of treatment as well. So, there's so much, and but also, he rejected the idea that, these problems, some of these psychological problems, was nothing to do with jinn or evil spirits. Yeah. So they very early on, they differentiate that, there was something psychological in origin, or organic in origin, but there's something supernatural or metaphysical, like evil eye, jinn possession and magic. So they're two separate things. Although, of course, one can go the other, but they were not the same thing. But although they may share similar symptoms, as in my books, I mentioned it in Evil Eye, jinn possession, and mental health issues. And next slide, please. Right, this is Al-Balkhi, and you should read about it because it's a beautiful book from Professor Malik Badri, who is the father. You probably know him anyway. He does come very often to Indonesia and Malaysia as well, but I think he has been to Indonesia as well. And, basically, when you ask people, who discovered cognitive behavior therapy, people would say, Wolf and Beck and all these people, but nothing to do with them. This was in 9th century. 9th century, Balkh, Al-Balkh, that's where the place he came from. He basically, developed cognitive therapy as we know today. But not only that, if you look at the DSM-5, it does Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5, which is from the American Psychological Association in 2013. When you look at they spent 10 years to do that. When they, on the left-hand side, when you look at their criteria for, I think it's OCD, I think so. Yeah, it is to do with OCD, which is obsessional compulsive disorder. And if you look at the right, what Balkhi said, there's no difference. No difference at all. Of course, we're going to give all the credit to to American psychologists and not Balkhi. But if you have time, read that book. It's a very small book written, about, not only about this OCD, but different disease, also cognitive behavior therapy. Can you move on? I think the next set of slides, also some of the symptoms, that's that the criteria for diagnosis, basically, and it's basically the same. So what I want to show you is that we have a big, as Muslim, we have a lot of heritage, and unfortunately, we don't know about it. And we are rediscovering it, some of us anyway, and we're more and more, we are discovering more, and we're trying to write a new narratives about, the history of psychology, or the history of Islamic psychology as well. But let's move on anyway. Again, talking about psychosomatic disorders, the mind and body interactions, that's what he said, I just quote, when the body becomes ill, it will prevent learning and other mental activities. We know that. Or performing duty in a proper manner. And when the soul is afflicted, the body will lose its natural ability to enjoy pleasure, and we find this life become distressed and disturbed. You recognize the reality of psychosomatic illness, that psychological pain may lead to bodily illness. Like psychological pain may give me a rash, may give me an allergic, may even sometimes, may me paralyzed, not spastic paralysis, but maybe, flaccid paralysis. So, which sometimes we can see in hysteria as well. Anyway. So, the conversion hysteria. So very early on, 9th century, we're talking about somebody writing in 9th century, not 21st century, 9th century, writing about this, which is today still valid, very valid. Next one, please. Next, I think, come to hospital. I think come. Oh, these are some of the people. I've run a course on history of Islamic psychology for more than 30 hours. I made a lot of video on it, and so we can spend hours on just history. But anyway, these are some of the experiments. Al-Kindi, experimental psychology, sleep and dreams, dream interpretation, Al-Razi, Al-Ghazali, I'm talking about classical conditioning, Ibn Khaldun, which is more or less a sociologist, but he talked about, but he talked also about, Azali was a traveler as well. He talked about nature, nurture debate, and others like Najmuddin Muhammad talking about different type of neurosis. So, I mean, during that time, all these things were basically identified and discovered, and written about, and treated as well. Okay, next one, please. This is the what I call Bimaristan. Bimaristan is a Persian word. Bima mean hospital, Ristan mean location, which means that where hospital are located. Yeah. So if you look at psychiatric hospital in Baghdad, the first one 705, 800, Damascus 1200. So people, there was no psychiatric hospital in Western world. Probably even not lunatic asylum. And probably people at that time, who were mentally ill were seen as witches that were killed, and murdered. So at that time, in Baghdad, in Damascus, Cairo, there were centers, there were hospitals treating mania, psychological distress, insane. You could see the garden there, this is a hospital, in fact, the building is still there. And you could see in the front there was water. There was, of course, water was a feature of Persian, Islamic architecture, and it's very soothing anyway. So people were treated with bath, with drugs, and music, and activities as well. So they were not just chained, like they did in the lunatic asylum in Western Europe. So even in terms of psychiatry and mental health, Islam was, Islamic scholars were pioneering them, in many of these. But again, when we learn about psychiatry history, we never learn about this. And this is the next slide is a Cairo hospital. The building is still there in Cairo, and what's interesting about it is, it's called Al-Mansuk Kalawin Hospital in Cairo. The building's still there. So that's what their policy was. I just read it here. The hospitals are keep all patient men and women until they're completely recovered. All costs be borne by the hospital, like a wakaf anyway. Whether people come near or far, or resident or foreigners, strong or weak, low or high, rich or poor, whatever it is. Okay. There are no condition of condition payment. None is objective and directly hinted for non-payment. The entire service is true, the management of God, the generous one. This was the policy of they treated everybody. There was no distinction between rich and poor. It was open. It was like the first national health service in Cairo, in Baghdad, and Damascus as well. So we are very, very far advanced in that. Okay, so this is quick story about the Golden Age. Let's move on to, we have time. Okay, now what Islamic psychology? Let's move on to the next slide. So basically, it's, of course, psychology the history of psychology went through different phases. Study of the soul became very common early on. Even, Aristotle talk about, Plato. In fact, Plato talk about, in fact, what's amazing with Plato is that he talk about that, the essence of being is in the heart, like what we believe as well. Anyway, so that's another story. So it's about, soul, and then people say, right, we don't want to study the soul. We're going to study the mind. That's where we came, what we call structuralists and functionalists. Anyway, we won't go into the detail of the approach. And so people start looking at consciousness, structure of the mind, and then decided, no. We can study that by introspection, that's the word. We want to use scientific evidence, what we call Western paradigm. Basically, anything that you don't observe, you can't measure, or it's not scientific. And then, so they start doing that. So basically, the next slide. So what happened is that nowadays, again, if you look at the definition as well, there's been changes. It was defined study of the soul, study of the mind, study of the consciousness, and then fourth stage study of human being experience. And nowadays, people are going back to study the soul. People are going back to study, like in the relationship between spirituality and health outcome. People are going back of studying, examining spirituality and, mental health outcome. We know from many research, there are a lot of evidence. Although there is most of the evidence are from Catholic or Christian studies, but very few Muslim. But nevertheless, we know that people go to church, people who attend this, who does that, who, have a religion or believe in spirituality or pray, whatever it is, in terms of they are less depressed, they live longer, they are healthier, they are, of course, there are deviations from that, but most of them, and there are hundreds of studies. Somebody did a review of 300 studies and found that there's a positive relationship between spirituality, religion as we know it, Islam, and also health outcome. So let's go back to the next phase. All right, as you know, it was what it was before. Ilm nafs, ilm means knowledge, nafs means self, the science of the self, and so people were studying that. That's what it was before. And, Islamic psychology was known as, and was the science of the nafs, the science. But we can know the self, the self for Islamic is based, we come back to that in the next slide. Anyway. Sure. Let's move on to that time. Anyway. We can move on anyway. Move on. That's okay. Now that's there's still a classical book. The late Asha, may Allah bless her, and reward her. She died a couple of last year, I think. Anyway, and her book is still classical. I think it's probably the best book in Islamic psychology. And she talked about the study of the soul, of course. The behavioral, the emotional, the mental process are also both seen and unseen, which means that thing that we see observable, but also the unseen, which is ghaib, which is what, supernatural, metaphysical. Because she said that, people, we are both physical and metaphysical beings. I think this is, I think I have a definition somewhere. I'm writing a book on psychology of human behavior and experience from Islamic perspective. Hopefully it'll be published, inshallah, this year. And I think I have my own definition, which is not very different from this. Let's move on. Again, when we talk about, you learn about fitra, the human nature, that, the belief in the oneness of Allah, the unicity of Allah, the belief of, that we're born like that. And that's the difference between Islamic theology and Christian theology. Christian theology believe that you are born with the original sin. Why? Because that's transmitted from Prophet Adam alayhi salam to you. Because all human, has been, cursed by God. You carry the sins and you transmit those sins to your children as well. Yeah. So you're born with what they call original sin. So it's only Jesus Christ, the Savior, that's going to be help you. That's from a Christian theology. In Islam, we don't believe that. We believe that you're born free. You're born with a pure soul. You're born with Tawheed. You're born with unicity of God. You're born with fitra. You're born positively. Yeah. And then, of course, the hadith by, if I'm correct, Ibn Majah, that, you're born a Muslim, but, your parents turn you into Christian, Zoroastrian, or Jews. Anyway. So basically, the hadith was saying that, you're born, that's why people why people don't talk about, I'm converted to Islam. People use the word reverted, which means they revert to what they were before. I know it's a matter of terminology, but people say, I'm not convert, convert between that you never was Muslim before. But according to Quran and, the fitra, we are born Muslim, but our parents have changes. And of course, part of the nafs, called the ruh, aql, irada, but also you have to feel the jasad, also the body, which is involved with that. Anyway, let's move on. Anyway, so terminology, you are used to it. Anyway, why there's a resurgence? Because there's been a resurgence for a long time. Again, most of the movement come from, from your part of the world, especially Malaysia, and of course Indonesia was playing a part of it as well. And because of Islamization of knowledge, and some of the people come from, Malaysia and so forth. And also, the different, in terms of, basically not psychology itself, but Islamization movement. and also all the conference they had in Riyadh and also in Pakistan, Islamabad, but also, in 1979 about, Malik Badri start talking about, moving away from the lizard hole. You all know about this lizard hole. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whatever the Jews and Christians do, we do the same. If they go into lizard hole, we go there. So, and that's what Badri meant by lizard hole, that some Muslim psychologists are still in the lizard hole, even after how many years? 120, 45, is it 45, am I correct? 41 years, yeah, 40, roughly. Yeah, 41 years ago, he talked about it. And a lot of us, as Muslims, we still follow Freud, we still follow things that's not compatible with our Aqidah. And I think that's why the resurgence of psychology. And now more and more, you're going to have more books. There are a lot of books coming out let's move to the next one. Anyway. And of course, these are the people, again, mostly from Malaysia, Indonesia, and also from India as well. Anyway. But these are the people who really, they were not really directly involved with psychology, but, some of them were. Anyway, okay, next one. And these are some of the books. Now, there are more books coming out, and of course, as you know, I don't want to plug my books. This, if you can see it, and this is in Bahasa Indonesian, if you can correct it. It was published this year, I think. Is it? Yeah. 2019, last year. So it's Counseling Islami Sebuah Pengantar kepada Teori dan Praktik. So there you are. So you can buy it in your own country. The book is also being published in Turkish, and also the book is being published in Arabic as well, inshallah. And so nowadays there are going to be more. There's just book come out. I got it yesterday from the Integrated Psychotherapy from the Khalil Center in Chicago, and it's come out. Taylor and Francis yesterday had first copy. There are other books coming out, and one of my book is coming out anyway. It's called, The Science of Human Behavior and Experience from Islamic Perspective. It's a textbook on psychology. It's basically a textbook on psychology where, it's very different from Asasud. Asasud cover mostly the psychology, mostly Quran Sunnah. I have done the same, but blended more scientific evidence, more psychology, mainstream psychology, but also with Quran and Sunnah. Inshallah. Still writing it up. I've got 4 chapters left. Okay, and this is the book we talk about, and this is we talk about Islamic counseling, and this was still not the. In fact, yesterday I changed it. I don't know whether you can see the slide there. Can you move it the next slide? No, it's not there. I have. It doesn't matter. Okay, yeah, we can. I mean, like I said, these are some of the counseling book that's at the moment there's, like I said, there's another one came out just this month anyway. I forgot the name of it, and it's called Integrated. I can tell you, give me a chance. I can tell you very quickly. Just give me. It's called Applying Islamic Principle to Clinical Mental Health, Introducing Traditionally Islamic Integrated Psychotherapy, TIP. Okay, so this is the book coming out. Next one, anyway. Just move on. Okay, I think I probably some of the models anyway. There are a lot of model of cycle. If you look at mostly a lot of it from Malaysia as well. I'm sure there are some in Indonesia, but and there's so many models anyway. I'm not saying that we should have one model. I don't think we can anyway. And in most in most of the psychology, you tend to have many, not only models, but also your different definitions. We're never going to agree on one definition of what Islamic counseling or what Islamic psychology is. They're going to be different definition according to different orientation. Models are going to be the same. And like at the moment, the Kashfari, the last one, and psychotherapy model, and they have evidence for that, is probably the best one, because I applied some philosophical assumption to it, and they came up as the best one. Of course, there are others, which is, some of them are okay, some of them are purely theoretical, some of them are practical, some of them, just we need more evidence to say whether they are good. Allah knows best anyway. Okay, and let's move on to the last question and answer. Right? Let's move on to the last one anyway. Okay, I hope be able to stop there anyway, and it's over an hour. And of course, this is a very, you probably know about it already. It's a very overview of it. It's just give you a glimpse of the richness and the cultural heritage that as Muslim we have. And and now it's up to you. You are the one that come along, you're young people, and you need to start working on it and have evidence-based practice, developing it. Of course, Islamic Online University and International Open University, is doing a lot of it, and but we need to develop more research and publish more, and what we do, because I'm sure in Indonesia there's a lot of good practice, but we don't know about it. It's probably only published in Bahasa Indonesia rather than English, so people English world won't know anyway. So anyway, I'll stop there, and I will take some question if there's anybody there. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hussein Rassool, for your explanation. So we will be waiting for a question from Facebook and also YouTube. So please type your question there, and we will read it and answer it, inshallah.
Okay. Can I drink some water first? Oh, no, sorry. Some quick water. While people are putting question, I just want to tell you what I'm doing at the moment. We're doing a big project. I'm working in, as you know, in Pakistan, and I'm working for a university. I'm also, as you know, director of the Institute of Clinical and Professional Psychology, which is quite there's 4 departments of it in different parts of the country. But one of the most important things we're doing is to build a center for Islamic psychology. Now we have a database. I mean, you could go on the website of Rifa International University. I'll write it down there anyway, and it's in the chat box anyway. And if you go in there, you go to Lahore branch, and then you go into faculty, you find that there's Center of Islamic Psychology. There's a database. We have a database of about 450 books or articles on Islamic psychology or related to Islam and psychology. And also what we're trying to do is to subdivide them. We are going to, like, for example, if you say health psychology, what are the books, what are the papers, and so forth. It's something that we'll carry on doing, because it's not something that's going to stop. That's one thing. Second thing we are doing, we are developing, we have developed a course in certificate in Islamic psychology. Although I wanted to do that for IUU, but anyway, and we have run the course for 6 months. It's based on 4 modules. There's 6 credit, the university credit. We're launching it online. We're launching it course in Islamic psychology. We're going to launch a course in Islamic counseling. We're going to psychotherapy. We're also launching a course in working with addiction, from Islamic perspective. So we're going to run a number of online courses soon, anyway. And okay. Let me read I just read it, so I'll read and see. In Western psychology, we know sometimes we relate to abnormal psychology like disability disorders, and how does the abnormal psychology Islamic perspective? Of course, I think, of course, they didn't use a particular word. The terminology was different, but I think you have to look at the symptoms and signs and symptoms. You know what they mean, and so I don't think diagnosis is that important. And for me, I've always been like that, because I'm always been anti-psychiatry in the sense, that if you look at diagnosis of people, you tend to treat them according to the diagnosis. If somebody is schizophrenia, I know I've seen it. I've seen it when I was working, in hospitals. That if somebody is schizophrenia, people start behaving. People treat them according to the label. No, I think I tend to have a very different view of that. I think you need to look at, of course, diagnosis is important. I'm not saying they are not. But what I'm saying is that it's best to look at people with needs, complex needs, with problems, with symptoms, and so forth, and treat them accordingly. It's like, having somebody dementia, Alzheimer, you don't talk to them, don't you? Because they can't remember. Don't you do your reminiscence therapy? So in a way, you treat the elderly the same, with respect and so forth, rather than treat them as Alzheimer. You understand that they have Alzheimer problem. You understand that they have short-term memory problem, but at the same time, you treat them, as if they are a normal person. So in a way, for me, sometimes and that's a very Western thing, diagnosis. Although, I'm not saying that we need diagnosis, to understand, where people are in treatment as well. But naturally, when we care for them, don't look at label too much. So whether, it's a motivation. Yeah, the right as a motivation. Whether we have intrinsic motivation or intrinsic motivation. In my new book, I talk about these type of motivation, or what I call spiritual motivation as well. Yeah. So when we talk about will, we talk about motivation as well. Of course, the will as well. So when we talk about mirada, it's about motivation, whether it's intrinsic from within or extrinsic. And this, again, you can sometimes not look at one concept. Then you look at the sort of motivation. It linked to locus of control. What we know in psychology, people have locus of control. They think that everything is determined by somebody outside, or they determine their own life. That's what they call intrinsic and locus, internal locus of control. So all these variables, sometimes they are all mixed up together. They're all related to one another. But irada is about will. It's about, the way I understand it, is about motivation. Of course, you need a PhD. Of course, you need a master's degree. You don't need, I think the problem, there's no, I don't know about Malaysia. Malaysia, maybe they do it also, maybe Indonesia as well. But also, in any other countries, people are doing it. I think it doesn't matter where you register, as long as you have the important thing about PhD is about getting a good supervisor. That's important. It's not about and also in some places they won't allow it. I know in Pakistan itself, a lot of people want to do psychology, and the head of department say, no, we don't do this thing here. Although they're Muslim, they're totally against any religious thing. So. But in fact, one of my staff asked me about it the other day. She wanted to do a PhD, and just remind me the same thing, And if you say Korean Islamic psychology, or you saying, you're talking about Islamic psychotherapy or counseling, or you can be, you can do both. You can be academic psychology as well as clinical psychology as well. But to do that, of course, PhD is good, but also you need to train as a psychotherapist, in both sides. But also, For me, an Islamic psychologist, an Islamic psychotherapist or counselor would need to have Islamic sciences. You cannot, I strongly believe that, you cannot practice as a therapist within the Islamic context, according to Quran Sunnah, without knowledge. I'm not saying you need to be a Hafiz, a Maulana, a scholar, no. But at least you have to know basic. Again, what you learn, I did the same as you, and the BA Islamic Studies in IUU. And I learned that from it. And we had a brilliant teacher in fiqh, and so I found that I use it in my therapy. The Sirat, if you've done the Sirat Islamic, is one of the best courses I've done, Sirat 1 and 2, the Hadith, the Tafsir, all these things, all this help you. You may not think, but you need to have basic Islamic sciences so that you can use Hadith, you can use the Quran when you're dealing with people problems. Anyway, I'm not looking at my thing there. Yes, there's too much labor in the DSM, even right between game addiction, the cameras. Yeah, if I'm not listening. Now, of course, it's a big problem. Yeah, 20 years ago, it was a psychiatric illness. This is the difference between man-made laws and divine laws. We change, For example, 2 centuries ago, 18th century, beginning, coffee was banned. The coffee we drink was banned in England. It was seen as people who drink coffee was deviant. Even in Mecca, the governor of Mecca banned it. But of course, they changed it afterwards. But so afterwards, you see what I mean? So it's man-made laws. Now, for example, we know that alcohol kill more people than maybe illicit drugs. But alcohol and tobacco are illicit drugs. So maybe if they came out nowadays, maybe people will have changed their mind. So in a way, when you have man-made laws, this is the problem you have. You keep changing according to what they call democratic secular society. Bill Phillips talk about it in some of the courses. Okay. The last question. Okay. That's the last question. Okay.
Okay, so
anyway,
thank you.
Anyway, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased. I'm sorry about the technical problem, and we didn't have too much problem, and inshallah, we can do it next time. But inshallah, we shall meet again. Maybe one day I'll come to, when things are getting better, I might come to Jakarta or wherever you are. And okay, I shall close down now. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anyway, if anybody wants to contact me, they can contact me, get my things, and they can ask me questions or whatever it is, and I'm there. So anyway, I'll say assalamu alaikum, and may Allah, give you more knowledge. And also, and also open the door of paradise for you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay,